Hello Horror Hounds. A couple of days ago, Jambo Shango uploaded a video where he listed his top 10 movies from the last 10 years. And at the very end of it, his partner in crime, Randy Mole, challenged him to name his top 5 vampire movies. I'll provide a link to that video down below. Do yourself a favour, definitely check out their channel, definitely subscribe. It's instantly worth your time. But having watched it and the internet being what it is, it's internet law that if someone puts a list up, someone else has to come in instantly and disagree. And so I did. I was just doing my duty. So Jambo has asked me to put my money where my mouth is and list my top 5 vampire movies of all time. And it's so difficult. Does a vampire top 5 list have to have a Christopher Lee movie in it? It seems obscene not to. What about the 80s, the last decade, I argue, that took vampires seriously and dealt with them creatively, so much so that ages ago I did a little mini-series called 80s Vampire Month that I will also link to below if you're at all interested in my opinion on 80s vampire movies. You could make a really solid top 5 vampire movies list, a top 10 list using only 80s vampire movies, and most people go, damn dude, that's a pretty good list. The concept of top 5 vampire movies is already broken because I can't mention the excellent 6-episode British TV miniseries called Ultraviolet, which to my mind is one of the greatest screen explorations and takes on vampires that I've ever seen. And what about in print? Whilst Salem's Lot has 2 adaptations, both of them really good for very different reasons. Shit, I haven't... Right, Salem's Lot isn't in my list now and I'm rethinking it badly. Shit. Print. Brian Lumley's Necroscope series can't be involved in this list. A criminally unadapted series of vampire books. If you want a unique, thought-through, compelling reinvention of the vampire, then you owe it to yourself to read the Necroscope books, which take as their jumping off point Cold War paranoia, the development of psychic government departments to fight enemies in the new extrasensory battlefront, and then encompasses portals to an alien world that acts the source of all our supernatural myths and monsters. If I were doing a top 10 list, we'll call these honourable mentions. Salem's Lot, that I've just realised. Toby Hooper's Salem's Lot. Interview with a Vampire. Werner Herzog's Nosferatu would make the cut. Dracula Prince of Darkness would make the cut. Dracula's Daughter, Universal's sequel to the Bela Lugosi Dracula, is a really interesting, unique, strange direction to go in. You'll never see a direct successor to a really successful tentpole movie so radically change up the game as you do between Dracula 1931 and Dracula's Daughter. And it's a fascinating movie. I wish people who made sequels nowadays would have the gumption, the balls, just the creative verve to shake things up so radically. And suddenly I realised that The Hunger isn't on my list. I think even a top 15 list would by necessity leave out some amazing vampire movies. But as it stands, with the caveat that as soon as I upload this, I will probably change my mind. My top 5 comprising vampire movies I enjoy the most, not necessarily the most pivotal or historically interesting or important vampire movies, are... I'll start with probably what will be the most controversial one. Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. I know it has some anchors in it that really drag, but I just think that movie is wildly, gloriously, surrealistically over the top. The way that it's an essay on historical filmmaking techniques. There are no computer effects in that at all. All the effects in Bram Stoker's Dracula are in-camera effects. That, on its own, is insane. The soundtrack is fucking amazing. The great performances outweigh the Keanu awful ones. Bram Stoker's Dracula makes my cut. After that, let's go from the ridiculous to the sublime. George Romero's Martin. A wildly, insanely original take on vampires. I said in my review for Martin, it's the Taxi Driver of vampire movies. Romero does for vampires what he did for zombies in Night of the Living Dead. The 80s is well represented with Near Dark and Fright Night. Surely no one can argue with those two being in any vampire top 5. And the final spot, the top spot, whatever you want to call it, in no particular order, Nosferatu, the original Nosferatu, Max Schreck, F.W. Murnau, one of the very few horror movies that actually scares me. But Count Orlok in Nosferatu is one scary mofo. So those are my 5: Nosferatu, Fright Night, Near Dark, Martin, and Bram Stoker's Dracula. There you go, internet. I've done a list. So you can tell me in the comments below just how wrong I am.